So good morning. So today is the day after Yom Kippur, which is partly, at least, why we're starting an hour later today. But here we are, and a lot going on this week. There is no Parsha this week because we last Shabbat already. Well, yesterday was Yom Kippur. We did not have a Parsha either. The week before that, over a week ago, we already read the second to last Parsha, Ha'azinu. This coming Shabbat is going to be Sukkot. And so we're going to have a special reading for Sukkot. And then we are going to read the final parsha of the Torah, Vezot HaBracha, next Friday, which is going to be Simchat Torah. We'll talk about that more next week, next Sunday. And the following day, which is Shabbat, we will be reading Bereshit, Genesis, the first parsha. And we'll talk about that more, hopefully, next week. But this week there is no Parsha. But the big news this week is that 5 days after Yom Kippur, or really this 4-day break, and then right after Yom Kippur, Wednesday night, we start the festival of Sukkot, which is a 7-day festival. So I'm going to give you a quick overview of Sukkot, and then I'll tell you what's going on. A lot of important things coming up. So Sukkot, the first 2 days of Sukkot is Yom Tov, is a holiday when we do not work. That will start Wednesday night and go all the way through to Friday evening when we greet Shabbat. So it's 2 days of Yom Tov, of holiday of not working, and then right afterwards we have Shabbat when we also do not work on Shabbat. So it's really 3 days of not working. Then after Shabbat, we begin Chol HaMoed, which is what we call the intermediate days of Sukkot, when it's still Sukkot, but we're allowed to work. And next week, we will talk in detail about that topic of Chol HaMoed, which is called the mundane holiday. It's a holiday, but you can work, and how that works. So this Wednesday night, Sukkot will begin. We light our candles at 5:59. On the days of Yom Tov, as we mentioned for Rosh Hashanah, we don't do all the different forms of work that we're forbidden to do on Shabbat, using electricity, using our driving, lighting fire, driving, writing, and many other forms of work that are forbidden on Shabbat are forbidden on Yom Tov as well. There's a couple of exceptions. The two primary exceptions is three primary exceptions is we are allowed to light a fire, but we're not allowed to strike a match. So you're allowed to light a fire from an existing flame. We're also allowed to cook, do everything we need, most of the things that we need for food preparation, and we are allowed to carry in a public area, which we're really not allowed to do on Shabbat. So we do light the candles though before the Yom Tov, before the holiday starts, in honor of the Yom Tov. We say a special bracha, and we say the Shehechianu blessing. Then the first night of Sukkot, we'll soon talk about the 2 mitzvahs of Sukkot, sitting in the Sukkah and living in the Sukkah and shaking the lulav. Then the second night of Sukkot, we then light our candles again, is going to be Thursday night. The second night, we always wait until the first day is over, which is when we see 3 stars. So that's going to be around 6:54 p.m. We will have candle lighting for the second day of Sukkot. Remember, to light candles from the second day of Sukkot, you cannot strike a match. You must use an existing flame. So you can either leave a very small gas flame on your stove, one way to do it, or maybe the safer way is to light one of those yard site candles, not for a yard site, but they're 24-hour candles. They will keep you going until the next day. Little trick for the wise. I learned this the hard way. If you want to light from a yard site candle that's burned down, it just has a little flame on the bottom because it's almost entirely burnt down, don't stick a match in. If you stick a match, the match will blow and it will draw all the oxygen and the flame from the candle will go out. So you can either stick the back of the match in or take a toothpick and light that, and it will light a lot better without pulling all the oxygen away. And that way, and then it will go. Then you can light it like you would light a match. Then the second day again ends on Friday night. And then Friday night, we light candles for Shabbat at 5:57 before Shabbat begins. Again, you don't let us strike a match. You have to use one of these 24-hour candles. You can even get there 48-hour candles. You could use that as well.
So the holiday, we light to light the candle on Shabbat, we have to light them before sunset, but technically the day.
On Shabbat, we still have to light before sunset, even though the second day hasn't yet finished, because Shabbat takes precedence over the Yom Tov. Very good question. So on Sukkot, we have two primary mitzvahs throughout the 7 days of Sukkot. The first mitzvah is to live in a sukkah. And we'll talk about that more in detail in our class in a moment. But there's a mitzvah to live in a sukkah that includes eating and drinking in the sukkah. Now, a whole week we're supposed to eat in the sukkah whenever we can. We'll soon talk about some of the laws of eating in the sukkah. But the first 2 nights, and particularly the first night of Sukkot, everybody should eat in a sukkah. Everyone should make an effort to eat in a sukkah. We therefore have a event here. We have a sukkah here at the JCC, a nice big beautiful sukkah, and we will have what we've been doing the last couple of years, soups and salads in our sukkah. So please join us for that. That will be Wednesday evening. This coming Wednesday at 7 p.m. You will have a chance to eat on the first night of Sukkot. The Talmud says, just as it is a mitzvah to eat matzah on the first night of Passover, so too it is a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah on the first night of Sukkot. It's a very important, very big mitzvah. Unfortunately, for some reason, people don't know about Sukkot. I don't know why. A few years ago, someone in our community came over to me during the Yom Kippur services, and he told me, I have an employee who's insisting that he needs 2 days off next week for a Jewish festival. Tell me there's no Jewish festival next week. I told him there absolutely is Sukkot. But unfortunately, too many Jews don't know about it for whatever reason. It got forgotten. But it's really important festival, very important, and it's very important to eat in the sukkah on Sukkot. The second mitzvah on Sukkot is to shake the lulav and etrog every single day of Sukkot. We are selling lulav sets, which you can purchase from the JCC or from the store, Manhattan Torah Center. I think they're about $70 a set. It comes with the lulav, the etrog, and the hadassim, the myrtles, and the aravot, the willows. And we will have them here. You can come on Wednesday. On Thursday. We only shake the lulav by day. On Thursday, we will have services here at 10 a.m. We'll have a big party after services. I'll tell you about that in a moment. And then on Friday, we'll have services with another big event afterwards. So come and shake the lulav. You'll get a chance to shake the lulav then. As well as next Sunday, we will have our, we'll give you a chance to shake the lulav, but ideally get your own lulav, and we are selling them here. Order your own lulav. It costs a little money, but it's worth it. It's a mitzvah. Yes?
When will they be available?
They will be available on Tuesday and Wednesday. We don't have them available too early because unfortunately the plants don't last very long, and you want them to last their whole Sukkot. So we don't, even in the refrigerator. So we have them vacuum packed, and we don't take them out of the vacuum pack until 2 days before Sukkot, until Tuesday. Yes. Yes. I'm going to get to that in a second. Thank you. Okay, so what is coming up? Just a couple events coming up. Firstly, thank you, Debbie, for mentioning it. So we've already sent out announcements, but my wife and I were blessed with a baby this past Thursday, a baby boy. Yes, and so great time to have a baby, but we plan on having the bris on the 8th day. Now, we don't know for certain if the bris is going to be on the 8th day. We probably won't know till Monday. It depends on the baby. If he cooperates. The Jewish tradition is that we don't do a bris with a baby that's jaundiced. It's not safe. You don't know until about day 3 or 4 after they're born, if they're jaundiced or not. So by tomorrow we should know for certain, or 5 if he's jaundiced. But hopefully he is not, and we plan on having the bris on Thursday. So just to give you a full schedule of the next few days, Wednesday night Sukkot begins. We said candle lighting. You should light candles yourself in your sukkah if you have one. Candle lighting will be at 5:59 p.m. We will have services here at 6 p.m. We will have our soup and salads in the sukkah here at the JCC at 7 p.m. The next morning, we will have services for Sukkot at 10 a.m. And then following the services at 12 p.m., we will have the bris, God willing, for my son. I will send out a confirmation tomorrow confirming it. So keep an eye out for it. But we will hopefully have the bris. I hope you will all join us for that. And we'll do the bris. And then afterwards, we'll have a big party in the sukkah over here. Then Thursday night, we light candles for the second night at 6:54 p.m., again from an existing candle, from existing flame. And then Friday morning, we will have services here at 10 a.m., followed by, we've had a long-standing tradition here on the second day of Sukkot to have a barbecue in the sukkah. So we'll have a barbecue here in the sukkah at about 12 p.m. Friday night, candle lighting is 5:57 p.m., followed by services at 6 p.m. And then Shabbat morning, we'll have regular services at 10 a.m. Then Sunday, which will be the fourth day of Sukkot, we'll have our regular breakfast going back to regular time at 9 a.m., but it will be outdoors in the sukkah. So it won't be in here, it will be outdoors in the sukkah. We will have the class at 9:30. Our topic is Chol HaMoed. We will speak about that, and we will also speak about Simchat Torah and the Parsha next week of Bereshit. So that will all be next week. That is the schedule. Hopefully you got the details down. Yes?
Do you want those that have a sukkah and a etrog to bring them?
You can definitely bring your own lulav and etrog. Absolutely. And if you come to services, you should definitely bring your lulav and etrog for the daytime services.
For both Thursday
and Friday, not Shabbat. Men and women. The mitzvah, the biblical command is a requirement for men like the sukkah, but the tradition is that men and women sit in a sukkah and shake the lulav. Yes. Oh, thank you. That's so generous of you. Well, thank you. Okay, so let's get straight to our topic for today, which is we've done a couple classes already on Sukkot over the last few years on the lulav and etrog. We did a special class once on the etrog. We spoke about building a sukkah. But today's class, I'd like to focus on sleeping in the sukkah and the controversy over sleeping in the sukkah. So the Torah tells us that on the 7 days of Sukkot, we must live in a sukkah. Basukot teshvu shiv'at yamim. Now this is living in the sukkah like shaking a lulav is one of a handful of commandments that are positive commandments bound by time, that have set time frame. And most such commandments, though not all, are obligatory, an obligation for men, Jewish men, not for women. Nevertheless, like most such mitzvot that women are not commanded, historically Jewish women have also made an effort to live in the sukkah and make a bracha, make a blessing for living in the sukkah. The same is also for shaking the lulav. Historically, Jewish women have made an effort to shake the lulav on Sukkot. Our sages explain, the Torah just says to live in a sukkah. How do you live in a sukkah? Everything in Jewish law, every mitzvah must be clearly defined. So how do you define living in a sukkah? So our sages say that the way we live in a sukkah is by eating and drinking, by sleeping and relaxing in the sukkah. Essentially, during Sukkot, the sukkah should be the place where we do whatever we do in our house. What do you do in your house? So our sages said the primary things people do in their house is eating and drinking, sleeping, and relaxing. So we are supposed to live in the sukkah. However, our sages say that we need not make ourselves feel uncomfortable, because you never want to be uncomfortable in your home. So therefore, if it's raining, if it's very cold, if it's very hot, if we are uncomfortable living in the sukkah, eating and drinking, sleeping or relaxing, then we are not required to live in the sukkah. So if we want to break it down, what exactly do we have to do in the sukkah? So there's 3 things: eating and drinking, sleeping and relaxing. sleeping, relaxing. So relaxing is very hard to define. How do you define relaxing? Relax. But you're never going to relax anywhere else outside of the sukkah, so it's not easy to define. So our sages said, relax in the sukkah when you can, but you could relax also wherever you want. Eating is very easy. You're required to eat all your meals in the sukkah on Sukkot. Well, how do you define a meal? Everything in Jewish law is defined. So we define eating a meal as eating at least an egg size that is about 2 ounces of bread or any other food made from 5 primary grains. In halacha, we include any meals as must be one of 5 primary grains that they had in biblical times, which are wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. And so if you have a meal made that includes 2 ounces or more of any of these 5 primary grains, you should eat them in your sukkah. Anything else? You don't have to. Snacks can be. Also, I should mention wine is a very prestigious drink. You should also drink in the sukkah because it's a really important drink. But otherwise, anything else, you don't have to eat in the sukkah if you don't want to. You're eating a snack, small, little, less than an egg size kind of bar or made of grain, or just eating a fruit. You can eat it in your house, drink it, taking a drink. That's fine. Drinking some water, you can drink it anywhere. However, our sages said ideally it's best not to eat anything outside the sukkah, and our sages say one should ideally not even drink water outside of the sukkah. And indeed, the Talmud tells us, or the Mishnah tells us, how many of our sages were careful to eat only in the sukkah, to even only drink water in the sukkah. However, really, women are not required to eat in the sukkah at all, although historically they did, and even men are only required to eat meals in the sukkah. Now, if you choose just to stack all day and not to eat any meals, or even to eat a meal without any of the 5 primary grains, in theory and today, people tend to cut down on carbs, so they don't eat a lot of grain. So in theory, you don't have to eat in the sukkah, except for the first 2 nights of Sukkot. On the first 2 nights of Sukkot, it is a mitzvah for everyone to eat in the sukkah. And as we said earlier, just as it is a mitzvah to eat matzah on the first 2 nights of Passover, so too it is a mitzvah to eat in the sukkah on the first 2 nights of Sukkot. So to be clear, the first 2 nights of the Sukkot is a mitzvah for everyone to eat in the sukkah, and at least definitely the first night of Sukkot. The rest of Sukkot, women are not obligated at all to eat in the sukkah. Men are obligated to eat meals in the sukkah that consist of at least an egg size or 2 ounces of food that includes grain, the biblical grains, so it excludes grains like corn or rice. You're required to eat in the sukkah, but it's ideal to eat everything in the sukkah, though definitely not required. Yes, Debbie?
So genetically modified food is okay?
Doesn't matter.
You said you can eat corn or rice? No.
Corn or rice outside the sukkah, yes, because it's not part of the 5 primary biblical grains, which are wheat, barley, oats, rye, and spelt. Corn and rice you can eat outside the sukkah. Although, again, it's ideal to eat everything in the sukkah, but definitely not required. Yes, Heather?
So to fulfill the mitzvah for the first 2 nights, only grains, or?
You could eat lots of delicious foods. One should also have grain, have challah, or have something with
So if
wheat
you
in it.
don't eat any grain, then
Someone who's
anything
unable
else.
to eat grain should eat something else and do their best.
But the mitzvah is.
Ideally to eat grain in
Okay,
the sukkah,
got it.
yes. Like matzah, it has to be grain.
Oh, matzah, no, they do this.
You don't have to eat matzah. You can eat any food that's grain-based
Right, got it.
of one of those 5
Can you
primary
remember
grains.
again the 5?
Wheat, barley,
Right.
rye, oats, and spelt. And for someone who has celiac disease and cannot eat gluten, they can eat oats, which is generally gluten-free. So the Talmud says, so that's as far as eating in the sukkah. What about sleeping in the sukkah? So the Talmud says that one is obligated, at least Jewish men are obligated to sleep in the sukkah. Jewish women can, and it's a mitzvah for them to do so. Not only when they go to sleep for the night, even if you take a nap, you should not take a nap outside of the sukkah. And in this way, sleeping in the sukkah is stricter than eating in the sukkah. Eating, if you eat snacks, you can eat outside the sukkah. Sleeping, one should not take a nap even outside. One should not even take a nap outside of the sukkah. One should only sleep in the sukkah throughout sukkah. That is what it says in the Talmud. However, historically, even our sages in the Talmud, often we know, practically did not sleep in the sukkah. We have one source of in the Talmud that appears to tell us about how people did not sleep in the sukkah. And this is in the book of Sukkah 53a. It describes Sukkot in Jerusalem when the temple stood. Now, Jerusalem Sukkot was a festive holiday. It was also a pilgrimage. The people would come from all over Israel to Jerusalem to offer sacrifices and watch the service in the temple. And on Sukkot, they had a special celebration called Simchat Beit HaShoeva, the joy of the water drawing. There was a special water pouring service on the altar on Sukkot. And they would, before they would draw the water from the pond, from the pool of the Shiloach, which was a kind of a natural pool in Jerusalem, before they would draw the water, they would have all night singing and dancing in preparation for the water drawing. And we once did a class where we spoke about the water drawing and the celebrations for it. So they would have all night celebration. So the Talmud tells us that the great sage Rabbi Yeshua, who was a sage after the destruction of the temple, but had been a young man before the destruction, described the Sukkot during the temple and said, we didn't sleep a whole week. Because during the day, we spent our time watching various sacrificial ceremonies, as well as praying and eating and studying Torah. And then at night, we danced all night as part of the celebrations. So there was no time to sleep. So the Talmud says, well, then that's impossible. A person cannot possibly go 7 days without sleeping. You can't even go more than 2 days without sleeping. And so the Talmud explains they didn't actually lie down to go to sleep, but they would doze off. They would take naps. They would take naps throughout the course of the day. But clearly, if they're taking naps during kind of dozing off while they're celebrating or while they're watching the various services, they're not in a sukkah. They were taking naps outside of the sukkah. So we see even then they were not sleeping in the sukkah. But this kind of fact, where this is a handful of things that we've discussed some similar things in previous classes. There's a handful of other things where the Torah law tells us one thing, and we know Jewish practice is somewhat different. And so we once did a class about Chadash, not eating new grain, before the second day of Passover, and Jewish practice historically has been different. There's a number of such examples. So this is another one where, although the Talmud tells us that the tradition is that one must sleep in the sukkah, however, historically, most Jews have not slept in the sukkah. And the first one that discusses this is the great sage, Rabbi Mordechai ben Hillel, who lived in Nuremberg, Germany, in the 13th century. And he suggested, his famous book known as the Mordechai, he suggests, he asks, why is it nobody sleeps in the sukkah anymore? Even though we know the law is that you do have to sleep in the sukkah. Why are they not sleeping in the sukkah? So he says, well, it's cold on Sukkot. He lived in Germany, it's pretty far north. It's cold on Sukkot, and it's very uncomfortable sleeping in the sukkah. And the rule is that if it's uncomfortable, you don't have to live in a sukkah if you're uncomfortable, because you don't live in your home when you're uncomfortable. You got to make yourself comfortable. So you're allowed to sleep at home in your bed if it's more comfortable, because it's really cold in the sukkah. A little after the Mordechai, we have Rabbi Menachem Meiri, who lived in southern France. It was then its own country called Provence in the late 13th century or 14th century. And he makes a similar point. He points out now in southern France, it's not as cold as in Germany on Sukkot during its usually October time. But he says it's a rainy time, and people are afraid it's going to rain on them, and they're going to sleep scared that it's going to rain. Or he points out that the Talmud says that you're exempt from sleeping in, the Talmud speaks about guards, watchmen that are watching orchards. And they don't have to build a sukkah, because if they build a sukkah, then the thieves will know where they are. They'll know that they're in the sukkah. So therefore, they don't have to build a sukkah. So if you're afraid of thieves, you don't have to sleep in the sukkah. And so the Rab Nachman Meiri says, well, where we live, there's a lot of thieves around. And if all the Jews slept in their sukkah on Sukkot, then they'll know that the houses are not in, there's nobody there. And they'll all break into the houses on Sukkot. So therefore, we don't sleep in our house on Sukkot. So that's another reason given why the widespread custom, at least by the 13th century, was that people did not sleep in their homes in their sukkahs on Sukkot. Rav Moshe Israelis, the Rabbah, who lived in Poland in the 16th century, he offers an additional explanation. He says, well, Sukkot are usually small, usually a one-room thing, and you can't really have a private room to sleep with your wife in the sukkah. You're going to sleep with your wife. You need privacy. You're not really going to get that in the sukkah. Most people don't really have the space to build a sukkah in their yard that's going to have a private room where they can sleep with their wives. Now, Sukkot is supposed to be a time of joy. It wouldn't be joyful if the couple would have to sleep separately. And then others add that even those who are single, aren't married, don't have to sleep in the sukkah, because it would be uncomfortable to make the single people sleep in the sukkah and all the couples are sleeping at home in their beds. So therefore, for all these above reasons that are given, all explanations that are given to explain what is the widespread custom not to sleep in a sukkah on Sukkot, even though the tradition tells us that you're supposed to sleep in the sukkah on Sukkot. And yet, there were sages over the years that said, even so, one should still sleep in the sukkah on Sukkot. The Vilna Gaon, famously, Rav Eliyahu of Vilna, famously wrote that one should make an effort to sleep in the sukkah, and others. And there were definitely many that did make an effort to sleep in the sukkah. However, in most Jewish communities, both Ashkenazi and Sephardi, most Jews, although we built sukkahs and we ate in the sukkah, historically, at least for 700-800 years, probably longer, we did not sleep in the sukkahs on Sukkot. There were always those who were extra careful and did, but most Jews generally did not. There were some places in Israel in ancient times or hundreds of years ago already, most people did sleep in Sukkot. So there were places where people did sleep in the sukkah, where everyone did, but that was the exception. Most Jewish communities, men and women, people did not sleep in the sukkah, except for a handful of people in each community that made an extra effort and slept in the sukkah on Sukkot. Now, the second Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Dov Ber, known better as the Mitzvah Rebbe, would also, although he was a great sage and he was very careful with his observance of mitzvot, of commandments in general, he would not sleep in his sukkah. And he once explained the reason why is, according to Kabbalah, there is a great, powerful spiritual revelation in the sukkah that can be felt in the sukkah called Makifid de Bina. Bina is the second of the 10 Sfirot. Now, the Sfirot are the tools that Hashem used in creation. And Kabbalah deals extensively with the Sfirot. We once did a class, one of these classes, Sunday morning, on the Sfirot, and we have it on the podcast. We've also done a couple other classes over the years on the Sfirot. So now the Sfirot can generally be split into two. The first three of the Sfirot, what we call the intellectual Sfirot, or the Imot mothers. The lower seven are what we call the emotional Sfirot, or the Kfulot, the doubles. The lower seven, the last seven, are generally considered Sfirot that are invested in creation. The first three Sfirot stand above creation. Bina, as the second of the Sfirot, is a Sfirah that stands above creation. Now, each of the Sfirot can also be split into two parts, what we call Pnimi and Makif. The direct and the part that stands around, or the Pnimi is the part that is invested within creation. The Makif is the part that stands outside of creation because it's too powerful to invest in creation. So Bina is a sphera that itself stands above creation. The Makif de Bina is the higher step part of Bina that is too powerful to be invested in creation. So it's a revelation of the Creator that is generally not felt in creation. And yet, as Israel traveled through the desert after they left Egypt, they were surrounded by these clouds that led them through the desert and that surrounded them all around. Our sages, and so Kabbalists explain that these clouds that surrounded them, they were a revelation of this very powerful level called Makif de Bina. Our Sukkah commemorates how Hashem protected us in the desert. And it commemorates those clouds, which is an extremely powerful godly revelation. So powerful that we know Yom Kippur is the holiest day of the year. Yom Kippur is the day, of course, that the Kohen Gadol, the high priest where the temple stood, would enter the Holy of Holies. Where there in the Holy of Holies, he would offer incense, Ketoret. And the incense would have this cloud, this mushroom cloud, that would spread throughout the room of the Holy of Holies, where the Ark of the Covenant stood. That cloud, we're told, also represents the same cloud that surrounded Israel as they traveled through the desert. The Sukkah, in other words, represents the same cloud of the incense of the high priest on Yom Kippur. And so Sukkot is that way an extension of Yom Kippur. So the Sukkah, therefore, has this very, very powerful godly revelation, this very, very powerful experience that can be felt in the Sukkah for those that are capable of experiencing it, of feeling these great spiritual powers. Now, because of this great spiritual revelation, the Reb Dov Ber, the Mittler Rebbe, felt it's inappropriate to sleep in the Sukkah. When you sleep, you're in a state where you're not aware of what's happening around you. You're not in control of yourselves. It's inappropriate. It's such a special holy place. It's inappropriate to sleep in the Sukkah while you are, when this great godly revelation can be felt, this great godly energy can be felt. And because of this, the Chabad Rebbes and many Hasidic leaders didn't sleep in the Sukkah. And therefore, followers of the Rebbe, Chabad followers, generally also did not sleep in the Sukkah. And the Rebbe explained that this is because it's a Jewish tradition. In general, people would copy the lead of their teacher's custom, the way their teacher, whatever their teacher did. People would generally follow the same customs. Furthermore, even if someone is not able to feel the great energy in the Sukkah, but that itself is painful. Knowing that you don't feel the energy in the Sukkah, but you know that it's there, and therefore we do not want to sleep in the Sukkah. Even more, the Rebbe said, it's somewhat inappropriate and even disrespectful to sleep in the Sukkah, given this great godly energy. And this explains why Hasidim, who are careful to not even drink water outside the Sukkah on Sukkot, nevertheless, they still do not sleep in the Sukkah. And that also explains why many Jews, or most Jews today, do not sleep in the Sukkah. Some do again, but most, the kind of standard, the normative practice is to eat in the Sukkah, but not to sleep in the Sukkah. Yes, Debbie?
So years ago, when they did sleep in the sukkah, was it only if they had their own private sukkah?
If they slept with their wives, they would have their own private sukkah, or they slept separately, women and men.
That's what I was going to ask. So if a temple had a sukkah, they would have two, and the women would sleep in one, and the men would sleep in another?
That's a good question. I don't know. I don't know what they would do if they didn't have a private room for each person. I don't know. In the temple, by the temple, people built their own sukkahs all over Jerusalem, right? People would have built their own sukkahs wherever they're staying in Jerusalem. So we do make sure to eat in the sukkah, as we said. The tradition today is not to sleep in the sukkah, although, again, many people still do sleep in the sukkah. Chabad does not sleep in the sukkah. Other Hasidic communities do not sleep in the sukkah, but there are many who want to be extra. But the standard in virtually all Jewish communities is not to sleep in the sukkah, but there are many who want to be careful and do sleep in the sukkah on Sukkot. So some do, most don't. Everybody eats in the sukkah, and ideally, definitely eats meals in the sukkah. Ideally, one should eat as much as possible in the sukkah. So the sukkah, we do eat in the sukkah. The sukkah is still a very powerful mitzvah. We also should not only eat in the sukkah, but also relax in the sukkah. Hang out in the sukkah. Spend time in the sukkah, whatever we would normally do. Play games or watch, I don't know if you could take your TV in the sukkah, but study, if you study Torah, study in the sukkah, read in the sukkah. It should be the place where we hang out on Sukkah. And the mitzvah of sukkahs living in the sukkah is really one of the most powerful mitzvah. As we explained, the same energy that was felt by the high priest, the Kohen Gadol, when he went into the Holy of Holies and offered the incense on Yom Kippur, that same energy can be felt in the sukkah. But the sukkah is also unique. It's unique in a couple different ways. But one way that the sukkah is unique is, usually when you do a mitzvah, you're doing a particular unique act. You're lighting a candle for Shabbat. You're wearing the tefillin. You're hearing the shofar, shaking the lulav, right? You're doing giving charity. You're doing a particular act. When you eat in the sukkah, all you're doing is you're eating. What are you eating? Your own food, the food that you cooked or prepared or bought. Nothing fancy, nothing holy. When you eat matzah, you're eating, but you're eating a special holy food. In the sukkah, you're just eating regular, having your regular dinner or your regular lunch. And yet it becomes a mitzvah because you're inside of the sukkah. You're inside of a holy place. So the sukkah shows you how you can take regular parts of life, eating your regular food, and that becomes a holy thing. That becomes a mitzvah. In the sukkah, you can take your regular life and turn it to a mitzvah, which is really part of our role in life in general, to turn our lives and make them holy, to make every part of our life holy. And the sukkah really brings that down, the way to make our lives holy. So with that, I'm going to leave you with the Sukkot begins, the importance of, we don't sleep in a sukkah on Sukkot, but although, as I said, some do, but of eating in the sukkah, especially that first night of Sukkot. So I'm going to invite you again to please join us on the first night of Sukkot, this coming Wednesday, 7 p.m. We will have delicious soup and salad here in the sukkah, and we look forward to seeing you all there. And just a reminder, also on Thursday, we will hopefully have our bris with the baby's cooperation. I will send out an email